Welcome to the Trachtenberg School Alumni Panel on Government Relations Careers. I am really excited to have alumni from all over the country representing very different industries, different backgrounds, to be able to share their insights with our Trachtenberg community. We're going to first start with having each of them provide a little bit of background about their current work and their career path, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So Nalia, you are first on my screen and the first one to log in, so I'm going to start with you.
Sounds good. Quick disclaimer. I am at a work conference and the Wi-Fi has been horrible at this hotel. So if my service is laggy or if I hop off, I'll do my best to come back in. But my name is Nalia Medina. I am the Assistant Director of Government Relations at NASFA, the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. So I work in higher education policy. Our members, if you've been in your financial aid office, that is who we represent. So we have about 30,000 members at about 3,000 colleges and universities across the country. I graduated from GW in 2022, undergrad, and I started taking graduate level courses that year, and I finished my MPA in 2023. The NASFA office is actually right a few blocks away from the Trachtenberg School, so kind of all worked out really well for me. Intern on Capitol Hill for my hometown district. And I really enjoyed that experience, but I think what I learned from that was that I didn't really want to be a congressional staffer, but I really enjoyed working with members of Congress and people on Capitol Hill. So that's kind of how I fell into government relations. So it brings me back often to Capitol Hill, and I get to kind of work closely with members of Congress, with the administration, the White House, the Department of Education. So yeah, happy to answer any questions. And I'm a first-gen student. I always love to say that as well. So I benefited from a lot of the federal student aid program. So that's very much the reason that I am here today, and appreciate the support that I always got at GW. So yeah, looking forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. And for those of you logging in late, Nalia was saying to us she's in a place at a conference, she's logging in. The reception isn't great, so appreciate the diligence with that. Christian, you're next on my screen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Rogers. I'm a federal government relations representative for KinderCare Learning Companies. Just a little bit about KLC. We're the largest for-profit child care provider in the nation. We have about 1,500 learning centers serving over 200,000 students. We also do a KinderCare for Employers program and then before and after school program. So about 40% of our students qualify for the Child Care Development Block Grant, which is essentially the primary federal funding stream for early childhood education. So that's why KinderCare has a government relations team. So most of my work is, advocating for high quality childhood education. I work primarily with health and human services, so it's a little different from ed. And I really got my start with government relations as an intern at WestEd. They were an education research consulting firm, and they did a lot of work with Department of Education trying to do professional development for teachers. And then after that, I was a policy analyst at ASA, the School Superintendents Association, the largest professional membership organization for school districts. So I've run the gamut of education with the exception of higher ed. Happy to answer any questions, and yeah, excited to hear about more of all of your interests.
Okay, we're going to next go to Jeremy, who kindly decided to stay on even after learning that I was an Eagles fan, and he's coming to us from Kansas City.
Yeah, it's been a little frustrating here in Kansas City, but we'll get through it. Everyone, I'm Jeremy Stos. I direct state and local government relations for a company you may have heard of called H&R Block. We're the world's largest tax services, tax preparer provider, 10,000 offices across the country and the world, really. I'm based in Kansas City, as Denise pointed out. I graduated from GW in 2005 in the MPP program. which was a really cool opportunity. I started working, unlike Nolly, I actually did like to work on Capitol Hill. And so I started working on the Hill. So I'd work on the Hill during the day. And then at night I would do classes in the grad school program at GW. And it was cool to learn, whatever policy analysis or, you know, uh, professors who worked at the OMB or the adjunct professors who were lobbyists, and then during the day I would get to apply what I learned in real life. And so it was a good opportunity. I actually worked for about a decade on the Hill, on the House side and the Senate side in the Kansas congressional delegation. And eventually, though, I wanted to get back home. H&R Block gave me a great opportunity. They're actually world headquartered here in Kansas City, and so they gave me an opportunity to do what I love but live where I wanted to live. And so I made that transition outside the Beltway, and I've been there with them for about a decade. Taken on a number of government relation roles. There's a lot you can do in this field. I started out by overhauling our PAC program, so our political action committee, raising money so that from employees and franchisees, so you can contribute to federal candidates. I started our first grassroots program for the company to, for example, send letters to Congress on an issue that comes up. Did some federal lobbying. Eventually, I kind of migrated away from most of that, and now I'm working on state and local government relations. So working with governors and state legislators on different issues that impact the company.
Okay, next we'll go over to Tracy.
Thanks, Denise, and thank you for the opportunity to chat with everybody today. So I'm Tracy. I work at Cummins, and if you're not familiar, Cummins is the world's largest independent engine manufacturer. So we make engines that go into the trucks and equipment that you see on the road. If you've ever ridden a DC bus, it's got a Cummins engine in it. So even if you don't know that you've encountered our products, you have. I've been at Cummins for 14 years and always in our government relations office here based in Washington, D.C., always doing federal advocacy. I started in an entry-level role after I had previously worked for a senator from Wisconsin, Russ Feingold, who lost his race in 2010. And so I was lucky enough to come over to Cummins then. And like I said, it was really an entry-level specialist role. And I've been here 14 years and have worked up, and now I lead our entire federal government relations group of 5 lobbyists. And I went to school at night, similar to Jeremy, to get my master's in public administration. I ended up, as you guys know, right, it's a 2-year program. It took me about 4 years because Cummins paid by the year. And so I maximized the amount that the company would give me to be able to do this. And every class I took and every paper I wrote, I did on a topic that I was lobbying. And what that allowed me to do was become, because I was younger at the time, and traditionally, we're a big engine maker. So it's a traditionally sort of male dominated field in the diesel space. And so it really helped me to focus and to gain a lot of the institutional knowledge that my peers had on the Impoundment Control Act, which is interestingly relevant again. And I really focused on budgeting processes because I thought every company, every organization needs to know how the federal budget works, which turned out to be prescient. So it served me well. I've also focused mainly on our energy and environment portfolio, but my team covers all of the issues under the sun that impacts a global Fortune 150 company. And so I'll just say, there's different ways as you guys are looking into or maybe starting careers in government relations. There's some shops that focus on, you're a Republican House lobbyist, you're a Democratic Senate lobbyist, and they split it bicamerally and bipartisanly. That's one way to do it. At Cummins, we do it by issue area, and we really strive to be deep subject matter policy experts. And that's how, similarly, Cummins thinks of itself as an engineering company that brings engineering expertise. We think of ourselves as advocates who bring policy and engineering expertise to inform decision making. So I think, as you all are thinking about next steps in your careers, think about, is your lobbying or is your advocacy more relationship based, or is it more subject matter expert based? Is it some combination of both? I think there's room for all of those. So, that's just one way I think that as you're exploring this career field, that if someone had told me that early on, it would have saved me a lot of learnings over the way. So just wanted to share that and looking forward to taking your questions.
Exactly why we do these panels, Tracy. That kind of insight from people in the field. Thank you so much. Kellen, we'll go over to you.
Hi, y'all. I'm Kellen Moore. I'm a government and industry relations manager at Freddie Mac. I was an MPP student at GW, finished in 2020. I had been out of college about 7 years at that point, and like Tracy and Jeremy, and I'm thinking a lot of folks, I did do the night program as well. So that meant, my program lasted 3 years. And by the time 3 was done, I was ready to be graduated. So kudos to you, Tracy, for, milking that, using your employee assistance benefit. I also use that. And appreciated that very much, for that help. And it's great. My employer offered that. But just to give quick background on Freddie Mac for folks that don't know, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae are the two government-sponsored enterprises that basically support the secondary mortgage market. And like a lot of agencies, the GSEs have been in a lot of conversations about what the future of those entities might look like. So it's certainly an interesting time to be a Washington observer and to be involved in government relations. And so in government relations, so my agency, we're under conservatorship. We have a federal regulator, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and so they police a lot, if not every, most of our communications to the Hill. So I think I could bring maybe a unique perspective on another, I guess, side of government relations, in that, again, so happy to elaborate on that. Even my previous role was at NeighborWorks America, which is a federally chartered entity that's federally appropriated. And there are, pretty strict rules on, frankly, lobbying with federal dollars. So most of my government relations work has been largely on the educational, and responding to congressional requests, and not much on the heavy or strong, more overt, lobbying type activity. So just, I guess, putting that out for folks that are considering, work in this space. There are different, sides and faces of government relations. But I think they can all be, equally rewarding, because I've certainly enjoyed my work, even if it's, not necessarily, pushing policy proposals. So nice to meet everyone.
Fantastic. And now to the West Coast of Esty.
Hi, everybody. My name is Esti Sepulveda, and I'm based in Los Angeles, California. I'm the Senior Manager for Government Relations and Industry Relations for Disney Experiences. That's the segment of the Walt Disney Company that oversees all of the parks worldwide, our hotels, the cruises, our consumer products, our children's publishing line of business. We have small armies, and I kind of am an air traffic controller, making sure that everyone's talking to each other and pushing content up or out, up to the company or out to our different parks or resorts. I've been at this role for 3 years. It's very interesting. Usually government relations is housed in maybe the legal department. Here, I'm in an internal comms role where we create content that we push out like to our industry partners or to our elected officials, which is different than what I've done in the past. Rewinding, I got my MPP at GW in 2010. I did it in, I think, 2.5 years. The first year I went full time. The second year I went part time. And because I started working on Capitol Hill, I worked on the Hill for 7 years and loved every moment of it. It was super fun. In a couple of offices, did some campaign work, got sent to Alaska in 2014, which was really fun. And then came back to California, where I'm originally from, first in the Bay Area. And I was working for a Bay Area transportation agency, and then moved back down home to LA in 2019, working for the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Southern California, which does a lot of the transportation and housing planning for the region. Um, and my whole life, career had been in public service, and then came corporate 3 years ago for Disney. And that was a huge change for me. I never thought I would work for a corporation or a private company. I always thought I would be in public service and loved all of that. So I definitely can talk to people about making that jump. Tracy, you unlocked a fun memory for me when I was working on Capitol Hill and going to school, and writing those papers. I'd often would call the Congressional Research Service to talk to them about, some intricate policy that I was writing about. And it was fun to have access to like the most expert people, in the country, helping me with my paper. So it was super fun doing that. But yeah, happy to talk to people about also being first gen, a Latina, a woman, and how moving away from home is very difficult for first generation immigrants, and coming back home and making a life in the career I wanted away from DC also is an interesting thing to do. So happy to chat about that too.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. I am sure I have questions in my head, but I am sure all of you have questions. So I want to begin to open it up to all of our attendees today. You can either, as I mentioned, put something into the chat or raise your hand. So I could ask questions, but this is an incredible opportunity for all of you. So let me pause and see who's ready to ask the first question. Okay, since I don't see questions, which I'm shocked, come on, people. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to ask any. Oh, there we go, Ryan, stepping it up. I'll have you start.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. My question is for someone looking to break into governmental affairs, having experience in the private sector for a few years, and now switching over to the public sector and realizing I like to merge the two. What is a skill, an underrated skill, I guess you could say, that is needed in this role to be successful and to kind of be competitive as you are applying in these positions?
Whoever wants to start with that, great question.
Ryan, I can kick us off because we've brought a bunch of people onto my team in the past 2 years, and I've seen folks who have sort of hit the ground running and those who, have maybe taken longer to get started. I think being a self-starter and thinking proactively about what needs to get done is underrated, and I'm actually shocked at how few people sort of take the initiative, even in any role, right? Like for my most entry-level team members and my more seasoned team members, people who are able to see the problem and generate a plan of action, like, is worth its weight in gold. And because what I love in my team members is folks who take the initiative and say, I know tax reform is coming up right now. I've made a list of all the Ways and Means and Finance members where the company has representation. My plan is to reach out and share this letter on our priorities, right? My team members who do that and don't wait for me to direct them to do that are my star players. And so I think just in any role, someone who's willing to see the problem and take an initiative, even if you still need to get approval to do the thing, or, you iterate a few times on the thing, just kicking off and getting the ball rolling, it makes such a difference in terms of like who is successful, and who is, do I have to take my time to make sure they're doing the things I need them to do, and they're more, they're going to do it if I ask them, but they're not coming up with the ideas. The people who come up with the ideas are just my folks who are like running up the chain and getting all the bonuses and promotions.
I can jump in as well. I echo everything that Tracy just shared. But one thing that for me I struggled with, I will admit, when I first started in my career in government relations was like the willingness to network and build relationships. I feel like I am, very introverted. I can be kind of timid in some situations, but I feel like what I've learned with government relations is that it's all about relationship building, right? And so the willingness to go out and find who are the key stakeholders in your industry, who are, the big partners, organizations that are, vocal in your space, getting to know them and just getting yourself out there, even if it's really just an introductory at the beginning, just planting that seed so that folks know who you are and that you are a trusted partner in the industry. And then, if something comes up down the line, they'll remember you, even if it was just an introductory conversation, so that they'll reach out to you for your expertise and knowledge down the line. So really just a willingness to engage with everyone in your industry, and that willingness to kind of get out of your comfort zone if you're not used to networking in that way.
I'll jump in as someone that represents a publicly traded corporation, owned majority stake by a private equity company. I think, if you're coming from that like corporate lens, it's always important to kind of explain the return on investment of what you're doing in your advocacy efforts, right? Like people, senior leaders of companies, like really don't understand the black box that's government, like why you're meeting with folks, why they don't get like what the importance of a committee of jurisdiction, right? So explaining your advocacy efforts, explaining your story, kind of like highlighting the value of what you're doing. I think it's just like an invaluable skill for whether you're being in a corporation or a membership organization or whatever it may be. You have to tell that story.
I can also jump in. One of the biggest things for me is actually writing. I don't think I was a strong writer when I went into grad school or was working on, or as I was entering. But when I finished working for my home state senator at that time, Dianne Feinstein, and then also um, graduating from GW, my writing was incredible. And I think that writing is just super important to get very good at. Um, I was in the Judiciary Committee for Senator Feinstein, and oftentimes the lawyers I was working with would argue over commas and periods because they matter. So I'm going to say that after that, I became a very strong writer, and it's a really good skill that I have had um, since the start of my career. Also, just understanding the legislative process. It doesn't, the reason I've been able to jump around from like across the country or between the public sector and the private sector is just my general understanding of politics and the government process, both in California and in Washington, D.C. You can insert any issue, and you just, but the mechanics of how the Senate works, how government works, the administration, Congress, all of that really matters in your government relations role. And then the stakeholders that generally play around an industry. That's also really important. And you're gonna get to know that as you go. But just make sure you retain all that like information because it just keeps popping up every time you enter a new role, you're doing the same thing. You're building that same, even though it's an issue area, it's still the same framework.
Yeah, and I'll just jump into George. If your pivot, is into government relations, I don't know what the private sector role you're like coming from, but if if you can see, you know, I'm in housing finance, right? So I feel like I've seen tons of people that, you know, maybe worked at like a larger financial institution or bank or something. So they you know, they can show up as a subject matter expert, you know, for finance related things like pretty easily, you know, and I feel like that kind of touches on, you know, Tracy's point too about, you know, how her shop operates. So I guess depending on where you're coming from in the, you know, private sector, it could be just kind of, again, kind of doing what Esti's saying, where you know the business, you just need to maybe, you know, get up to speed on, you know, how the filibuster works, or, you know, cloture or something else like that. But anyway, I hope that helps.
Sorry, I had an issue with my screen. Aubriana.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. I just put on my AirPods, but um I was wondering what is everyone's like hardest and most rewarding aspects of working within like government relations?
It silenced everybody.
I could kick off again. I would say that the hardest thing is also can be one of the most rewarding things when it gets right, which is, especially with the federal government, nothing happens fast, right? The wins take a long time. So one example I have, the hydrogen production tax credit that was eventually passed. This incentivizes domestic clean hydrogen production in the US. I was part of a group that started conceiving of such a tax credit in 2020. You know, we worked both with the Senate and industry to draft what that might look like, and did a lot of economic studies on how that would support the industry, and even worked on like what would some of the rules have to be to ensure that it was only going to clean hydrogen. Even then, it took 2.5 years to actually pass within the IRA, and then another 2 years to get guidance from Treasury out on that tax credit. So, and we're still seeing issues because that took so long. It's now under a regulatory review and freeze. So I'd say, like, I think anytime you're doing federal advocacy, you have to be okay with not seeing the fruits of your labor for 5, 6, 7 years, which, you know, if you like an immediate gratification, can be kind of sad. But it is also quite rewarding when it does happen, right? And we don't all, you know, a lot of what I do is defense, prevent, and it's much harder to champion the bad things that didn't happen because you tried. And so I think that's another one where it can be a little bit discouraging, but when you finally do get the big wins and something across the finish line, it's really extra gratifying because it was a labor of love in some instances. So I would say, like, it is challenging, especially, you know, I work for a corporation and we're focused on quarterly results. And when I tell our leadership that something is, you know, they're not going to see a benefit for several years when another transportation bill is up, or, you know, something actually moves, like it's hard to explain why it's still impactful and important, and we can't let up. But that's kind of the nature of the game. And I think if you're, to Esti's point, a good writer and a good communicator of that, then you've got that buy-in from your leadership, that they understand that it's a process. So that's my view.
Oh, Jeremy, feel free to go. I saw that you unmuted.
Tracy said that incredibly well. The best is wins, the worst is losses or just delays, especially on the federal level work. That's one of the things as I transitioned to federal GR to like state GR or local, things happen a lot quicker. And, you know, you usually know within a few months if you've won or lost, and that could be good, it could be bad. That's a challenge or a benefit depending on how you look at it. You know, it's also, I think, the challenging part, and this is from kind of a corporate lobbyist perspective, is also you know there's things that are outside your control. Elections matter. Um, a state like Minnesota, for example, will they're literally on they have a tie right now between their Democrats and their Republicans, but like that, depending on your issue you're working, like however they resolve it, and they're still working it out, like that will matter on your issue depending on what your issue is. And so I think it's, that's tough to communicate that, regardless of what, sometimes, you do your best and you advocate and you use all your tools, but sometimes, you just, it's not in the cards and it's out of your control.
Anyone else want to add to this one? Christian, I see you've unmuted.
Yeah. So I was like, I got my bachelor's in youth and social innovation. So I was or am super passionate about like education policy in general. So that's like a tough question for me. Like it's very rewarding, like everyone else said, when you get the wins for students and families. I think it's also in a similar vein, just tough managing expectations, right? And what's realistic for internal and external stakeholders. So a lot of times we're working in coalitions with trade associations, and you might be bringing a different perspective than someone else, and you have those rubs. So those are difficult, but like I don't know. I think it's also just fun kind of being in the mix of things. Like even in today's world, like it's kind of an adrenaline rush in certain situations. So I think that's kind of an appeal to the profession, if you will.
If I could quickly jump in as well, I echo what y'all have shared about the hardest things. I also agree. I think sometimes it's hard to stay encouraged in a political landscape where it's hard to get things moving quickly, or to see momentum on an issue. For rewarding, I have two quick things. On a personal note, going back to something that Estee mentioned kind of in her introduction, I'm a first-gen Latina daughter of immigrants. So sometimes when I'm having conversations with members of Congress or with folks at the department or OMB, like personally, sometimes I sit on these calls and I'm like, wow, I can't believe like this is where my life has gotten me. Like sometimes I sit in shock that this is what I get to do. But on another note, professionally, from a membership association perspective, one thing that's really rewarding for me is when I get to help our members prepare for meetings on Capitol Hill. So I get to take kind of my knowledge and expertise and share that with folks that don't really do this in their day-to-day lives. They're working on college campuses, helping students access higher ed, but I get to help them develop talking points or advocacy materials or how to research members and different bills and things like that. So I would say professionally, I think it's really rewarding when I get to share my expertise with folks that aren't really in this work on the day to day so that they can go out and advocate for their students and their families.
Fantastic. This is wonderful. I'm loving this. Elisa.
Hey, sorry for the delay. My Zoom is being really glitchy today. Thank you all so much for this panel. It's really interesting. I have two different questions, and I'll just share them both briefly, if that's okay. One is on terminology. The different terms like government relations versus government affairs versus public affairs. Are those all pretty much interchangeable, or if you see distinctions between them, I'd love to hear what those are. And then the second question I have is, I would love to hear more about the differences or sort of distinctions between doing this work in the public and private sectors. And my background is I've worked in legislative affairs at a federal agency. So kind of like what Kellen was saying, it was a lot about answering questions from Congress, providing information to Congress. But if you have any advice on moving into, switching to other kinds of sectors where the focus is more on direct advocacy or lobbying, that would be super helpful.
Who wants to start with this one? Ellen.
Yeah, I kind of want to say, folks help me out, but I think, government relations, I'm trying to think about how the way companies use it. I think, I don't know if I see a lot, not that, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have something informed to offer here. I see a lot of government relations titles, but then there are, I guess, proper lobbying firms, and I think maybe that's where you're going to see the distinction in job title. But others might have something more informed to add to that.
I'll jump in. For public affairs, for me, so government relations and anything with government like that, for the most part, I think it's straightforward and interchangeable. But when you add the public affairs component, you're adding other external stakeholders that are not in government. So it could probably be like academics, other nonprofits, um, like community organizations. But you start, for us also, that's when we have like media as a stakeholder. Um, so it broadens from like just government officials as your um like who you're talking to or outreaching to just generally external stakeholders. But you kind of treat them the same, and that was to your second question on like how you can jump between industries, or even like for me, like the public sector, private sector. um I think that for me, like I started off in Capitol Hill, writing talking points for the elected official. When you still continue on in the public sector, for me, it was a transportation agency or a metropolitan planning organization. You kind of were doing it, but for the local electeds or whoever the elected board was. And then now for like the company, you kind of do it for the executives of the company. So you're doing the same tasks, but who you're doing it for is different. Obviously, telling a story for like the head of Disney Experiences for me is different than writing talking points for the mayor of a local city here. But generally, you're preparing them externally to talk to the electeds. So here for me, like before, people would come into the office on Capitol Hill to lobby you, and then in the public sector, I was lobbying Congress for more money for buses or more money for planning housing. But now, like here with Disney, like we're telling a different story about maybe how we treat our cast members, the really great programs that we have for our around veterans hiring. And now the story is different, but the table's here, but you're just switching sides. It's kind of the way I view it.
Yeah, I can expand on that a little. And one to your first question on terminology, I think everyone got it right. The other thing I'll add that I've seen is in Europe, they're much more likely to call it public affairs. I don't know if that's universal or how, and I think to Estee's point, it is generally a broader remit, but in fact, I believe Cummins, my company, has government relations in lots of different regions, and the job is called government relations here in DC and public affairs in London and Brussels. So I don't know, but there's no, I mean, we use the same job descriptions and they're on my team. So it's all the same thing for whatever that's worth. I'll also say one thing I've noticed, and I've only worked on, in advocacy for a company, but I've got a team member who came from an embassy. And one thing that she's been learning that I would say is instructive is at a company, you have to communicate much more simply. And you have to remember that no one knows how government works or any government terminology. And so we actually just today have been going back and forth. She's writing an update on the tariffs that were put in place today. And we had to go back like she was explaining, this isn't an EO, it's a proclamation. I said, they don't know what that means. You got to back way up, right? Why should they care? And so we're just working through, how do you write things in a way for an audience that does not have time and is not keeping up on the latest. And so I think it's really like one of the big differences when you're working in a government or for, doing congressional affairs in a government agency is everyone knows what a CR is. Everyone knows, what appropriations are. And so you don't have to explain that. And at a company, like, you have to assume you're working with folks who remember Schoolhouse Rock, and that's the most government that they have. And so it's definitely like, I think SD2 made the point earlier about writing, and for me and my team, the most important thing is to write in a simple way that someone who's filtering through 100 emails can absorb your information quickly and is not getting bogged down in details.
Yeah, I like to say our job is we're translators in a lot of ways, and you have one foot in government, you have one foot in business, and so you're in that middle ground of telling folks in government what business is doing and educating them, but also it goes the reverse way, like Tracy just said, of making sure they know what's your company knows what's going on too.
Yeah, I would just add, like, I don't know, government relations, it seems to me at least, it's a lot of direct lobbying. Like, you might have to be a registered lobbyist on the federal side, which essentially means you're spending more of your, like, it's essentially more than 20% of your time interacting with elected officials. So, if you're thinking about doing something more like analysis heavy, or, um, analysis, policy oriented, I would look for things that are like policy specialist, advisor type roles. If you want to be doing a bunch of public speaking, I think you'll get that more with government relations. That's just my take.
A question came in on the chat where someone wanted to know, is there anything that you regret or wish you had known earlier to avoid making any mistakes in your career? Big question. I see SD smiling. I see everybody shaking their head and smiling. I'm sure there's some great insights on this. And I'm going to actually use this as the final wrap-up question because I'm looking at the time. After this one, I want to open up the breakout rooms. This is a beautiful one to end on.
I'll go. I think you're just going to mess up in your career. So, be ready for that, accept that, and brush yourself off and pick yourself back up. Because things are moving fast, you're always reacting, and that's just part of life. So
Love that.
I'll give advice. I thankfully avoided it because someone gave me this advice at the right time. I was between two opportunities, one for a solar company and one here at Cummins, which at the time just really did diesel engines. And I was coming, environmental idealist. I wanted to change the world. And of course, the solar company seemed like a much better choice. But I got really good advice to look not just at the company or the mission, but the people. And at Cummins, I got calls back, they were calling me back. They answered all of my questions. They told me about all the paths for advancement, all the great things they were doing in the environmental space. And at the solar company, they didn't, right? They didn't always answer my calls. They weren't very communicative. You could feel that it was a high stress environment. So I've been at Cummins 14 years now. I took that advice. I worked for the people and not necessarily the mission. In that time, I've gotten to advance. I got Cummins to come out in support of a carbon price and other environmental policies, which like arguably could make a bigger difference than working at a company that was making solar panels, which is great, but I think they've gone through like 10 rounds of layoffs since that opportunity opened for me. So like, just I think in terms of, I'm glad I avoided that mistake of looking more at the mission than the people that you're spending every day with and working with.
One question that I don't think a lot of candidates ask when they're looking to get hired at, whether it's a company or a nonprofit or whatever organization, GR or GA or whatever PA, whatever we're calling it, is how does that organization, whatever it is, how do they treat the role? Are they resourcing it? Are you, do you have access to the CEO, for example? That's something that I don't think a lot of people think about, but they should, because it's gonna affect your life, your work life, and what you can do, frankly, in your job and your role.
Anyone else want to add to this one? Okay. Well, I want to thank our alumni. This was, I always appreciate the learning that I gain from all of you. It is just absolutely tremendous about your career paths, how you balance things in school, and about the field. So I really appreciate all of your time and your insights that you share. As I always like to remind our alum, you get career services life. So we appreciate you giving back here. And please always remember, we're here for all of you in whatever way we can support you in continuing to do this work. So thank you very much.
Can I say a quick thing before we go into breakout rooms? Because I'm
Yeah.
not sure if we'll come back. I just wanted to give you a quick shout out and encourage everyone on the call to use you as a resource. You were the first person that reviewed my resume when I applied for this job at NASFA. So just a big thank you to you, and would encourage everyone to use you as a resource moving forward.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for those kind words. That means so much to me. Thank you. Oh gosh, I needed that. It's been a long month. So thank you. So